I have spent the last 10 months with the Nikon Z6 II, my big upgrade from DSLR to mirrorless, and have taken nearly 10,000 photos with it. Now with the Z6 III out, you might be wondering, is the Z6 II still worth it? Whether you're deciding between the two cameras or just curious about what the Z6 II can do, you're in the right place. Stick around to find out why this camera is my go-to. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then I'm Anshu and I have been a photographer for over 15 years now. So today I'm diving in a 10-month review of my camera, the Nikon Z6 II, which I own and use almost every day. Now this has been my go-to camera for the last 10 months and I have pushed it to its limit. I have used it for nearly everything, right from still life to travel to portraits and even creating videos. This is my main camera I use for creating YouTube videos. So today I'm going to give you my honest opinion about how this camera has performed in the last 10 months of my usage. So this was a big switch for me because this was the first time I was using a mirrorless camera. Before this, I have been using a Nikon D750. Now stick around till the end because I'll give you my honest opinion and recommendation if this camera is worth purchasing even today or not. So let's begin. Now, before we begin this video, I just wanted to add a few disclaimers. Now, since I purchased this camera, Nikon has come up with a new version, which is the Nikon Z6 III version. And definitely it comes with many more features and improved capabilities. But that camera is also priced around 1 lakh rupees more than this version. So obviously if you have the budget, I would recommend you still go ahead and purchase a Z6 III version. Today's video is not about comparing both the version, but it's more from my practical experience in terms of what I have learned using this camera in the past 10 months. And I also intend to use this camera for years to come. Maybe unless someone gives me a free camera, I'll still continue using this camera. Final disclaimer which I wanted to add was that this video is not going to be super technical. So this is more from my practical experience of how I have used this camera in last 10 months. But still, so that you don't take my word for what I am saying, I'm also going to do some field test with the camera. I am trying to do whatever best I can in the limited resources I have. So having all these disclaimers out of the way, so let's start with the review of this camera. To start with, the Nikon Z6 II is a full frame camera with a 24.5 megapixel sensor. It is incredibly versatile, it has a solid design, and it is also quite lightweight. And Nikon Z6 II uses the flagship Nikon Dual Exceed 6 processor, which ensures that everything is running smoothly. Now, to use your old G version lenses, that is the lenses from the DSLR, you will need an f/2Z converter. Now this will ensure that all your previous DSLR version lenses are compatible. And so I have found that the G version lenses sometimes works better on the mirrorless camera than it used to work on my older DSLR. I have put a link below where you can go and check your lens compatibility with the mirrorless for all the older version. Now just bear in mind that most of the G version lenses from Nikon will work really well with the mirrorless using the adapter, but the older lenses, which is is like the D version lenses, and lenses older than that will not manually focus on your mirrorless. So you will have to do a manual focus. But the good thing about using a mirrorless is that it has a feature called as focus peaking, where you can really see which element of your photograph is in focus, and it becomes easier for you to do a manual focusing and clicking that particular photo. Now, the Nikon Z6 II was my first upgrade from a DSLR version. It was a huge improvement, I feel. Now, when compared to my older D750, this camera is definitely lightweight, and especially if you pair it with a lighter lenses, and it's really very, very helpful to carry it around. Over the past 10 months, I have used this camera extensively on few of my travels, and I feel it is really very lightweight to carry along with you on the travel. So I have carried it on beaches, I wouldn't say mountains, but probably literally to a lot of adverse situation. And if you pair it with a lightweight lens, it really is very easy to carry. Okay, so next we are going to do a ISO test. Now, ISO is one thing which really made me switch to a mirrorless, and I will show it to you actually, so don't take my word for it. Now, with Nikon Z6 II, the ISO ranges from 100 to 51,200 range, which is, I feel, quite a large range, and most of the photos taken at, say, even somewhere around 12,000 ISO is really usable, I feel. There's very less grain and noise. So let's go ahead and do a field test with the ISO now. Okay, so to do this ISO test, what I have done is I have a room now which is completely dark except for that string lights or the bulbs which is coming from the background. I don't know if you can really see it right now. And I have a small toy house which I have placed on the desk, and my focus is now set on this particular toy. So currently the ISO is on 100, and now let me just go ahead and increase, and the scene will start getting brighter. So the ISO is now on 400, and I think you can now see the toy. This is now on 3200. So I can see, and as I continue, so now it is on 6400. Now it is at 12800, which is quite high, but I will have to go back on the computer and see how grainy it is. I really cannot make out, and the noise will start showing up now. Now it is at 25600. And this is at 51,200, which is the maximum ISO this camera has. Yeah, I can see on the table, below the table, it is starting to look quite grainy. But let me know what you feel about this setting. Okay, now next is the autofocus test. I know there are a lot of mirrorless camera which actually have perfect autofocus, but Nikon Z6 II is nothing less. And obviously coming from a DSLR which had kind of practically, there was no eye detection in a DSLR, and I really didn't even know what eye detection is in a camera before, and it was really a huge upgrade. And I feel that now most of my photos, probably the accuracy level of autofocus has definitely increased, whereas on a DSLR I was having a lot of misses. You can use it for a lot of moving subjects or even sports for that matter. Now again, don't take my word for it, but we are going to do a field test where I will show you how the autofocus on this camera has performed. So let's go. Now for the autofocus test, I have kept my camera in the eye detection mode, I'm using a 50mm lens and I have mounted my camera on a tripod. Now I'm shooting at 30 frames per second and I have asked my daughter to move in and out of the frame, and let's see how the autofocus performs. I wanted to quickly touch around the portrait photography. Now, as I mentioned, portrait photography, especially doing a lot of portraits in low light, has really been excellent on this camera. I have started doing a lot of low light portrait photography, and the reason for that is it's features combined, right? So I use a lot of eye detection when I am doing a portrait. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight was about the bokeh. Now, bokeh is something, the blurred background you get when you are clicking a subject with a very shallow depth of field. Now, that is my kind of photography. I really love adding bokehs in my photos, not only portraits but still lives. And this is not more of I would say a mirrorless feature, but it is more coming from a full frame capability. Now, because Nikon Z6 II is a full frame camera, the bokeh rendering I feel is much better when you compare it to a cropped camera. I have used a DSLR D90 as my first SLR camera, and I know that. So when I switched from a D90 to a D750, I could see the difference in how the bokeh was being rendered in the background, and I feel this is one of a very good features to have, especially if you're doing a portrait photography, and this camera really handles it very well. So I do a lot of still life photos, like food photography or something indoor, maybe toys or cars or whatever. And I feel that this camera has really performed very well for a still life kind of a photography, and especially when you pair it with a lens like the 50mm 1.8s lens, which was the first lens I was using on this camera. Now, combined with the lens, the images are really very sharp and very crisp, and the color rendering on these images is absolutely perfect. And in fact, I actually don't do a lot of post-processing. Probably I do a very minimal post-processing, maybe just correct exposure or the white balance sometimes. I don't use Lightroom or any kind of a software like that, but it really has helped me in spending less time in post-processing and focusing more on the setup and the photography which I am doing. So it's really been an excellent still life camera, I would say. Okay, so the main reason why I shifted to a mirrorless was for the video capability. As I have been saying in a lot of my previous videos, I have no video making experience. In fact, this was the camera, the first camera I started making videos with, and I have since, I would say it's obviously a big upgrade coming from a DSLR version. Now, when I was using my D750, it was a great camera, obviously, but when it comes to video capability, it had a very limited video capability features. So maybe just to start, it could only shoot in HD, and there was no stabilization built in whatsoever. I feel somehow that I have really missed out on making videos in past so many years, and I probably should have started doing videos much earlier, but whatever, here we are. So I am with my new camera, and I really like making videos with this camera. I wouldn't say it is a kind of a camera which you should be buying only for video, because it's more like a hybrid camera, but it does support 4K videos, and which is, I feel, enough for me as a starter or someone who's just started making videos. Let's do a field test again, and I will show you exactly how the stabilization of this camera is. Now there are 3 VR modes in this camera inbuilt. One is obviously the VR when you switch it off. The other one is normal, and the higher advanced one is the sports. So before we jump into my recommendation for this camera and tell you why I have been using it continuously for past 10 months, I have put it to practically to all kinds of possible situations and put it to its limit. Few things which I don't like so much about this camera, and things which I feel could have been better, and few of these things, just as a reminder, has already been addressed in the Z6 III version, which is already out from now 4 months now. But obviously these are things which I still feel could have been addressed in this camera itself. Okay, the first thing which I wanted to mention was about the battery life. Now Nikon does give you an additional battery with the camera, and I feel that 2 batteries are sufficient for a general kind of photography, and you can carry it with you and it will last you for the day. But if you are doing a professional photography, like doing, say, a wedding photography, or even doing a lot of videos, then the battery will not last. So you will definitely have to go ahead and carry some additional batteries, which will really be very helpful. Now usually when I'm shooting a video and I do a lot of retakes, sometimes the battery doesn't last for more than a session, and I have to go ahead and recharge my batteries after that. So the other thing which I wanted to point out was there is no inbuilt flash in the camera. Even though I'm not a kind of a flash user, and I rarely have used flash on my previous camera, but I still feel that you should have that option of having a flash on the camera. Now the other thing, and I feel this is a major shortcoming, is the absence of a flip screen. If you're creating videos for YouTube, it's a very good option to have a flip screen, and I feel most of the Sony cameras and probably even Canon and even the latest Z6 III already has that, but I don't know still why they never included that. So the flip screen is something which you can tilt and point it towards yourself, so you can live monitor yourself when you're trying to do a video. And it does have a tilt screen, which I would still point out is very useful, especially if you're doing or taking photos from a high up angle. Okay, the other thing I wanted to point out was it's not like a shortcoming, but because now these cameras are becoming so expensive, they also expect you to buy expensive cards. So this camera supports only one SD card slot, and there is the other card slot which is the CF Express, and I was not aware of that before buying this camera, and it is more expensive. So there is definitely an absence of other SD card support. And finally, talking about the video capabilities, I also touched about this briefly in this video earlier. Now this has a 4K capability, all good and fine, but you cannot use a 60 fps without cropping your video footage. So for example, if I'm using a 85mm lens and I want to take a video at 60 fps, then I will get maybe a crop, yeah, it will be something like 120mm, which is like too zoomed for me, right? So just bear in mind. And even one of the reason I actually went ahead and purchased a Viltrox lens 20mm just so that I could take videos at 60 fps. If you want to shoot something wide, you will have to go with extra wide lens if you want to shoot 4K at 60 fps. So that is something to keep in mind. And I think obviously this is already addressed in the new version. You have the Z6 III. I read the capability, it has the capability even to shoot at 6K, which is definitely tremendous. But apart from that, for me, someone who's a new video creator, I feel this is more than sufficient, and I really don't mind cropping my videos a bit just to get that higher frames per second. The other thing I wanted to also mention was that it doesn't support N-Log. Internally within the camera, you will have to use an external monitor, and I was completely unaware of these features. I didn't know what was an N-Log, but after maybe months of trying to see how to create videos, I feel, yeah, that is probably one of the important criterias of creating video. You definitely need some kind of an N-Log support so that you can post-process with your own maybe cinematic looks or whatever you want to do that. So that is definitely missing in this camera, and it could have been a good added feature. For me, it really works well. I really don't post-process my videos, and the color rendering and all is perfectly fine for me as a beginner. After 10 months of using this camera, I would say that I definitely recommend this camera, and this camera is definitely something which you can go ahead and even purchase today with a lot of even newer versions coming out in the market. And I feel personally that you should have a kind of a minimal setup and not be really bothered about the camera and the gear. Remember, it's always the photographer which makes the photos, not the camera. So if something like a camera like this, which is perfectly doing the job, it's really doing the job very well, then obviously this is a camera which I also intend to use for years to come. And personally for me, from moving from a DSLR to a mirrorless was already a big upgrade, and this has been plenty for me, and I really admire how much capabilities or how much now kind of extended freedom I have. I can go ahead and click night photos. I can go ahead and click 4K videos, which is something which I always have wanted to do, really. And this has been sufficient for me, and really one of the best mirrorless camera which I think is there out in the market today, even with the newer versions coming out. I feel that this camera is super versatile. It will perform really well in all different kinds of conditions. Thank you so much for watching this video and sticking around till the end. If you do like my video and want to see more content like this, then don't forget subscribing to my channel. And do let me know in the comments, are you planning to buy a Nikon Z6 II or even a Z6 III? What are your preferences when you want to go ahead and buy a mirrorless camera? And any questions you have about this camera, then do drop me a note. I will be more than happy to address them. And I will see you next time in another video. Till then, happy clicking. Bye.